This is Duke University.
So just a little bit of a background. I identify as an educator and entrepreneur. And I share that because that's how I'm informed in my scholarly pursuits as well as in my practice. And so today's session right now is going to look, I hope, less lecture-y and more engaging because we're going to be using experiential activities and dialogue, and then also personal reflections as we think about and engage in developmental relationships, networks, which is essentially mentoring. Pursuing a doctorate through Fielding Graduate University. And with that, I wanted to just share my objectives for today, which is to present an overview of developmental networks and the relationship that it has to traditional one-to-one mentoring, as well as my particular interest, which is in group mentoring. To engage in hands-on experiences, I think we learn best by being immersed in our learning experiences, and hopefully to enjoy the experience. So what I'd like us to do is to first individually take a purposeful pause and to think about one or two or all of these questions that are examples of questions of depth and significance. Oftentimes, and I work with university students, particularly student leaders and student athletes. They don't, and I think really we can say generally, we don't spend enough time thinking about things that deeply matter to us, those things that bring us joy, those things that light our fires, those things that give us meaning. And so I thought we would take a brief opportunity to read through these, think of other questions that we might be wrestling with at the moment in our lives, and then to have a brief conversation with a person next to us. I was really fascinated how you said Delaney was talking about this idea of networks with anonymity. And for developmental networks, the opposite is true. That developmental networks, mentoring relationships, are based on trust and a sort of intimacy that people have with one another. And so, although for many of us in the room, we know each other by the backs of our heads for the last 4 hours, but hopefully we have some semblance of trust with one another, that we can engage in a brief conversation about one of these questions. So take a moment, do some reflective thinking, and then I'll invite us to find a partner and have a conversation about this. So while ideas are simmering, go ahead and find a partner and engage with that mentoring buddy. Your reflections on some of these questions or one of these questions. And then we'll go from there. Exactly.
just the things that like fire and excitement, curiosity, possibly that they're not my main goals. There's something I kind of wish I could steer towards them.
And if both people in the pairs have yet to have an opportunity to speak, make sure you switch so that you both are doing some sharing and asking and inquiring and engaging.
A lot of the style over there is better. My dissertation basically
Oh, you're not in the way. It's actually perfect.
It's exactly what it's called.
I have no idea whether we need to
what humanities actually does for community. Well, my work is in science fiction, so I'm interested in thinking about science fiction. I don't just feel the conventional sense of science fiction. Science fiction makes kind of social issues.
So, in interest of time,
But thinking about the ideal from a fictional point and how the fictional does
in interest of time, I want to gather together again as a large group. And I'd love to hear from some folks, how was that experience? Talking, reflecting, yeah. How was that for you? Uncomfortable? Comfortable? Exciting?
Yes,
All of the above?
exciting.
Exciting. All right, we'll speak more about that.
We talked about how kind of these questions seem to be geared, well, I'm not sure if they're exactly geared towards this, but to us they seem to be geared towards what's your academic pursuit or your professional pursuit, or what should it be in the future? What lights my fire? Why does my heart sing for medieval architecture? But we realize that, you know, sometimes those things are different from what we're actually doing right now. And there are other things that really light our fire that come from our more personal lives and how much we'd love to reconcile our professional and personal ambitions.
Awesome. And what is your name?
Joe.
Joe. Thank you for sharing that. Yes.
So I wanted to bounce off that. One thing I thought was really interesting with these questions is that normally whenever you're, asked to talk to the person next to you, you're asked to leave your comfort zone. But these questions seem to actually kind of define your comfort zone. They're defining where you're comfortable, either academically or in your personal life. So I thought it was really cool to explain. This is what I like to do. This is where I feel safe, where I feel powerful, and then, it allows you to kind of open up because it's, where you're strongest.
And what is your name?
My name's Barry.
Barry. I really appreciate both of what you had to say, and I appreciate the emotion with which both of you shared. You were both smiling while talking about this experience. And that tends to be the experience when we're in a mentoring relationship. This was, and I recognize that mentoring is sometimes a lifelong experience and journey. It's more than just a 3.5 or 6 minute conversation with somebody whom we just met that morning potentially. But this is sort of the tip of the iceberg, just a taste of mentoring. And I wanted to make this experiential for us because mentorship has been defined and described in many, 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 many different ways, typically within 3 different contexts. Within a workplace, a professional context, which is something that you alluded to, with youth, and we know of Big Brothers Big Sisters as a model of youth mentoring in this country. And then also within higher education, faculty members to undergraduate students, administrators to students, graduate students or doctoral students with one another in a peer mentoring format. And everyone, whether they are defining it or not, has some sort of idea of what mentoring is about or has participated in some type of mentorship experience, which is both magical and maddening because we all come to the table with so many diverse, different perspectives of what mentoring is. So maybe we could just do an experiment and people can shout out and share a little bit of how you understand or conceptualize mentoring. Listening, okay.
Modeling behavior.
What's that?
Modeling.
Modeling, yeah.
Discussion and strategies to move forward.
Great,
Being an example.
awesome. Very good, thank you. All of those are accurate. And all of those position mentorship in some sort of box, right? It begins to give it some shape. So that we're all on the same page, I'm going to toss out my understanding of mentorship based on the literature and these many definitions that exist. And then I'll talk a little bit about some aspects of this definition. But for me, mentoring and mentorship is a distinctive relational learning experience whereby the participants, through challenge and support, enhance the personal growth and professional development or professional skills of the others. With that, it's a special relationship. It's much different, or much more different than advising or supervising or coaching, although it has those elements to it. As Dela's Park shares, it's a distinctive role in the story of human becoming. There are these elements of challenge and support, and the challenge creates the developmental position. It creates disequilibrium in a person. And so we ask these questions of depth and significance because it causes us to pause and to think about where are we at now compared to where do I want to go? What does that gap look like? And what do I need to do or want to do in order to get to that place? But it's also a supportive experience. There's encouragement, there's empowerment. The challenge is implemented with care and compassion. And it's a process. We want to make the strange familiar. It's collaborative. And my belief, although much of the literature, especially the literature housed within workplace or organizational development and theory, states that mentoring is related to professional development. That for me, it's caring for the whole. It's for our whole self, not just our professional development, but also our personal development. And I think Southern really talks to this idea, and she's speaking about mentors in particular, but in the way that I recognize mentorship, mentors and mentees are one and the same. We play both roles. We serve as mentors when that time is needed, and we also are mentees when we are in need. Mentors are advocates and supporters of people. They are passionate about their work, willing to take risks, and willing to challenge us in our thinking. They help us grow as people, discover aspects of ourselves that were previously unknown, imagine new possibilities, and realize our dreams. Mentoring requires that we know the whole person. So as I mentioned, these experiences that we just did were a taste. We can hardly know the whole person of that who sits next to us in an afternoon. So with that, I'll cover a brief history of mentorship. It's been in existence for just about forever. which is quite interesting, that it only came to be as something that we recognize with the Odyssey. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, became mentor at Ulysses' request as he was about to leave for his journey, and mentored Telemachus, Ulysses' son. But we also know that mentorship was found in the succession procedures of 3 Chinese kings, which is called Shanjiang, before the Common Era. So if we think 100 or 200 years in advance, and then on the other side of time, that's when mentorship was happening in a documented sense. And then through apprenticeship models, ancient Babylon and Egypt, medieval Europe, and the Renaissance, and I'm assuming the 3 gentlemen that were referenced today engaged in some sort of mentoring experience as one taught the next and the next. And of course, in present day, all over the world. So with that, I want us to take another purposeful pause, because what we experienced before was this traditional one-to-one mentoring model. The developmental network approach is slightly different in that we have these multiple dyadic relationships, and we're pulling wisdom and knowledge and the experiences of others from multiple sets. And so continue thinking about these questions, and what we're going to do is utilize the World Cafe methodology. Are folks familiar with that? No? Yes, some? So essentially what we're going to do is begin having a conversation with our previous partner. And then when the time is up, when I ask us to find new partners, we're going to take a hold of that conversation. And we're going to bring that conversation to another person with whom we're going to dialogue about these same questions. So that after 3 or 4 rounds of this, we're having a much more complete picture of how we understand these questions and connect to them, but also of the dialogue that I was having with my previous partners and what that means for these future conversations that I'm having. So with that, take another minute to do just some silent personal reflection based on your thinking of this, as well as the dialogue that we had just before. And then we'll engage in some dyadic work. And then when I call for us to continue, we'll move on to other pairs. Sounds good? If you're feeling ready to begin dialoguing, you can connect with your previous partner for a brief dialogue.
I guess I kind of feel at home my comfort zone is like that. I like
So take the next 30 seconds to wrap up these conversations. Yeah. And I'm going to ask for everybody to find a new partner. And of course, what you want to do is introduce yourself, but then you want to carry the conversation that you just had to this next dialogue that you'll be engaging in. Right? You're going to take that wisdom, you're going to take that knowledge, and you'll add it so you can layer on throughout the next 6 minutes as we move from partner to partner, a layered conversation. So find a new partner and continue what you've been dialoguing about. And if everybody could find another new partner and continue the conversation. Okay, why don't we cut the conversations and we'll come back to the group, or just continue. So in the interest of time, why don't we come gather back together again? So I deeply apologize for pulling you from what I assume are very rich conversations. So how was that experience compared to the previous one?
It went from very uncomfortable to, hey, I want to finish this conversation.
Okay.
It's like, John, quiet down.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not your turn.
This is the good part. Yeah, why are you pulling me from this? I'm just getting warmed up. Other thoughts? Differences that you felt from the one-to-one experience compared to this World Cafe-esque style?
Well, I think it, because each person brings a different perspective to it, adds a layer, multiple layers to the answer.
Totally. Absolutely. And that's where this idea of developmental networks comes from. And Kathy Cram, who first wrote about it in her book, Mentoring at Work in '85, called it a relationship constellation. And it's multiple concurrent, dyadic, networked relationships. So compared to traditional one-to-one mentorship where a mentor engages with a mentee and that's the end of it, this is a mentor engages with multiple mentees all at the same time in order to garner whatever we can from these diverse perspectives. And it has focused on two different elements, this idea of career advancement, and much of that has to do with it being situated within an organizational workplace context, as well as psychosocial development. But the philosophy is, it is unlikely that any single mentor can adequately fulfill my needs, can adequately provide me with all that I deserve or desire from a mentoring relationship. And the success of this type of experience is derived from the network diversity so that I can pull from a whole variety of mentors in my life, within my professional context, my personal relationships, and the strength of the relationship, right? How connected our ties are, how strong that pencil drawing is. With that, the formal research tends to take place within workplace and organizational life. And so a lot of it talks about this career advancement piece. But for me, as an educator who works with university students, I think the idea of mentorship networks applies to the students with whom we work, because constantly in the conversations I'm having, they're referencing conversations with older student leaders, with their coach, with their academic advisor, with their faculty members, with other administrators across campus. So I recognize I'm not the only mentor in their life. They have many of these individuals who are playing a significant role. With that, I'm a visual learner, and so I wanted to provide a visual. A traditional one-to-one approach is a mentor and a mentee. The developmental network approach is a mentee potentially with his or her supervisors, personal support system members, colleagues or peers, personal or professional associates, organization or community members. It's based on who I, as a mentee, believe provides value to my life. With that, because we live in systems, I don't know if this diagram alone suffices, in that a supervisor, although they're playing the mentoring role to a particular mentee, are also a mentee. And that individual is mentored by many other people. And somebody from the personal support system of that particular mentee becomes a mentee. Cool? Does this make sense? Groovy. With that, I want to touch upon group mentorship, which is my area of interest, which emerged in the late 1990s. Because, as compared to other dyadic relationships, and even though mentoring has proven to be incredibly rewarding and important in the lives of individuals, it also has been destructive and damaging to others because it can be very hierarchical, exclusionary, and elitist. And it also serves as a reinforcing agent designed to protect existing role orthodoxies or traditions. And so group mentoring came along as a way to challenge the way we engage in mentorship. And it's a constructive approach with three significant pillars. The one is inclusivity. So those who have been traditionally marginalized, women, people of color, are intentionally included in this experience. And its structure encourages all voices to be not only present, but active in the mentoring. It's non-hierarchical. And so in this circle model, rank and authority is limited. So if we're in an organizational context and the CEO of the organization and an intern and middle managers of every level are participating as a group of 8, let's say, they intentionally recognize that although they hold various levels of power and rank within the organization, in that experience, they all have wisdom and knowledge to share that's valuable and valued. And the power is distributed, so leadership is shared, and it has a bartering system of development rather than banking. And so Freire used this idea of banking in that, in terms of mentorship, a mentor deposits knowledge onto a mentee, and that's the end of it. In a bartering system, both the mentor and mentee exchange roles and places within the relationship, so they both have something to offer that's valuable to that individual based on what they believe is valuable to them to gain from that relationship and experience. And so, group mentorship tends to look something like this, and the language of collaborator is used because of the nature of that experience rather than mentor and mentee. And so I would love for us to experience with this for a moment. So what we're going to do is we'll just create 2 sort of circles, maybe one over on this side and one in the back by the comfortable red beanbag chair. And we'll engage in these same questions, but as a group mentoring experience rather than a one-to-one dyadic experience. Cool? Is that okay, or are people not feeling it? It's good? All right, thumbs up. We'll do it just for 5 minutes.
So we go either side or we go
Either side, yeah, wherever you want to go.
Sounds a little. Oh, I don't know that.
These groups alienating people.
If anybody has that,
one thing that's really cool is that everyone can talk at the same time, and no one has their way to do it. Because you can have them in 2 separate things, and that way people can talk about the presentation without talking about and looking to have an internal conversation or like Nicaragua sounds good. You only have one channel of sound in the room, otherwise you have to listen to the right? So that the vaccine automatically solves that problem.
So let's come back together. I want to make sure we can move on without going over time too much. So why don't we come back together and we'll wrap up.
We do it in place in our new groups.
Yeah. Yeah, is everybody comfortable?
We are at home in our
Okay.
new groups. They are exciting our curiosities and love your
But Jonathan, you say you're not involved in any of these dyadic relationships, or are you like reinstating this hierarchical?
How might you realize your
I
potential by joining us next time?
What's that?
You might realize your potential by joining our circle.
Yeah, that's a good tie into that question. You know, I thought about that.
We just used all of them.
How can we help you?
Yeah, there's lots of ways. Believe you me. You know, that's an interesting question. And as a facilitator, you're always caught of, you know, how do I navigate into any or all of the groups and also just be up here and allow the groups to do their own thing. So I appreciate that recognition. With that, I always think it's appropriate to be able to give some kind of takeaway, so that from this learning experience into the real world out there, we know what we're doing. So with that, the question is, how do we even begin this process of developing mentoring relationships? The first thing is for us to do that intentional reflection on the questions of meaning in our lives, to think about, where do I want to go, or what skills do I want to develop. Mentoring works best when we know where we're headed, so we can share that with whoever's in that mentoring relationship with us, so they can provide guided assistance, rather than just saying, I need mentorship in everything. Right? When we know specifically what we're after, it gives a stronger opportunity for that relationship to emerge. Then we need to be purposeful about figuring out who in our life, who in our vast networks of networks can help us, assist us in answering that call, answering that question that we're working towards. And then we also need to be purposeful in providing that invitation. Rarely, especially in group mentorship, do those groups just form. But we, if that's something that we care about, need to provide the context and the space for the group to come together and provide those invitations. And I think that's also true for one-to-one relationships, either in the developmental network or the traditional form, that we oftentimes need to have a formal invitation conversation to begin that process. So with that, I wanted to play a song to mix things up a little bit, that I think really resonates with the core of building these relationships. In the book, How Full Is Your Bucket? Rath and Clifton used strengths and positive psychology to talk about feeling fulfilled. And they say that one of the best ways to do that is to build relationships, and that there is a primary task that we need to do in order to build relationships. Does anybody want to guess what that first task is? No?
What's the question?
If you're going to build a relationship with somebody, what's the first thing you want to do?
Trust.
Okay, I'm even thinking more basic than that. What's that?
Talk to them.
Talk to them, yeah. And what's one of the first things you would ask them?
What's your name?
Yes, that's right. That's perfect. And this song that I'm going to play, I think, is a comical experience of asking that person's name. And then we'll close. Cool? So sit back, relax, listen, enjoy. So this is Moe's Haven. Can everybody hear that?
When you're walking through the campus and you don't want to say hi, you give them the head nod. Head nod. There's no time to stop and talk. You're just passing by, so you give them the head nod. What's up? Is it an appropriate response to what's up? Nothing is also an appropriate response to what's up. There's no time to elaborate. Your class has started and you're already late. So you say, what's up? What's up? How you doing? It's basically the same as what's up. How you doing? It's the same as what's up. It's no better, it's no worse. Just follow the directions that I gave you in the last verse. But if they mention your name as you're walking through the campus, then it means they really like you. They really like you. If they mention your name, it's better than a head nod. It's better than what's up. It's better than how you doing. If they mention your name, it's so much better than a head nod. It's better than what's up.
When that Joe wants rather than I want to be like, hey Joe, instead of
So they just continue on. But the reason I play that song is not just because it's funny, which it is. And it's funny because it's true. If we care about our own learning and growth and development, mentoring relationships, these developmental relationships, are critical. And the way that we can form those is by tapping into our networks and building those relationships. And the first thing to do that is to learn people's names. And so I'm sure many of us in this room, as we look to engage in these conversations, can get to know one another by learning our names. I'm sure as many of us engage on campus or with professional colleagues through associations, we want to look to these mentors in the field. And the first thing to do is to ask their name and then build a relationship. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, John.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.